The world had stopped pretending to be kind a long time ago. Taylor stood at the edge of the dead zone, his breath misting faintly in the chill air. Dust blew across the ruins in slow, restless swirls, stirring bits of rusted metal and the hollow bones of a city that had once thrived. The wind smelled like burnt plastic and stale ozone, like every storm had passed through fire before it reached here. He'd been scavenging for almost 4 hours. Most of the sector had already been picked clean, but sometimes things resurfaced. Bunkers collapsed, old warehouses caved in. Sometimes you got lucky. Today, luck had a different face. He spotted the movement through the corner of his visor. Something crouched low behind the wreckage of an overturned transport hauler. It wasn't mechanical, and it wasn't just another starving animal. No, this moved with intent. Desperate, but cautious. Human, maybe? Or something close? Taylor knelt behind the crumbling shell of a supply unit and adjusted the focus on his scope. And there, hunched in the ashes of broken metal and rotting insulation, was a woman. Her skin was a pale mottled green, stained by dirt, bruised in places. Her long black hair hung in tangled ropes down her back, matted with soot and grease. She was barefoot, knees sunk deep into grime, hands bloodied from sifting through sharp debris. Not scavenging with purpose, just digging, frantic, like she was hoping somehow to find salvation in trash. A child moved beside her. Smaller, lighter. The same green-tinged skin, but unmarred, cleaner somehow, like her mother had done everything in her power to keep the filth from touching her. The girl couldn't have been older than 5. Her black curls were wild and knotted, but her eyes, wide, silver-ringed, were bright. Too bright for this place. The woman suddenly paused. Her head snapped up, her shoulders tensed. She'd felt something. Maybe his presence, or maybe just a flicker of the survival instinct that hadn't yet burned out. She immediately pulled the child behind her, one arm spread protectively. Her lips moved in a sharp whisper, a warning, a command. Tyler held his breath. This wasn't the first time he'd seen people broken by the outskirts, but this was different. She wasn't just surviving. She was hiding, guarded. Like she'd been hunted before and had never stopped running. He adjusted the strap of his pack and stepped forward slowly, making his approach obvious. He kept his hands up, empty, palms open. She saw him, and in that instant her body locked into something feral and unwavering. Her eyes weren't just wary, they were daring him to come closer, daring him to try something, anything. Pride radiated from her like heat, pride sharpened by suffering. "I'm not here to hurt you," Tyler said quietly. I saw you and thought maybe." She didn't respond. Her gaze flicked to his gear, to the knife strapped to his thigh, to the thermal pouch slung over his shoulder. Then came a small voice from behind her, soft and innocent, cutting through the air like a bell ringing in ruins. "Mommy, this one smells better than the squishy rat soup." The woman, realized he'd later learn, didn't move, but something in her jaw twitched. Her fingers tightened around the child's small shoulder. Taylor crouched slowly, wincing as his knees cracked. He unslung the thermal pouch and popped it open just enough for the scent to drift. Stew. Real stew. Root vegetables, some rehydrated grains, a sliver of protein from a vendor 3 sectors south. It wasn't much, but here, it was a feast. He set the container down on a slab of broken concrete and slid it toward them. No strings, just food. The child peeked out again, eyes darting from the steaming container to his face. He smiled just a little, a smile that asked for nothing. The woman didn't blink. Still, the girl took a step forward, then another, and another. She knelt beside the container, sniffed it dramatically, then looked up at her mother with something like pleading in her expression. Relay gave a slight nod. "Barely there." The girl dug in, hands first, burning her fingers in her rush to grab a chunk of root. She yelped and giggled at the same time. It's hot, it's really hot, but it's so good. Relay stayed rigid. She hadn't moved at all, but her eyes had shifted. Slightly less steel, slightly more weight. Watching him, measuring, still expecting a trick. Taylor stayed in place, careful not to break the fragile thread of trust forming in the air. "I've got more," he said gently. "Shelter, just down the old mag rail. Water that doesn't taste like blood. Blankets. You're welcome to it." Silence. The woman said nothing, but the child, mouth full, stew dripping from her chin, looked up at him and grinned. "You talk funny, but not bad funny." Taylor chuckled. "That's a first." He stood slowly, careful not to disturb the moment. "I'll leave this," he said, gesturing to a wrapped protein bar he set next to the stew, "and I'll be back through here tomorrow. If you need anything, I'll be around." He turned, adjusting the straps on his shoulders, and walked away. No part of him expected to hear a sound, but then, just as he stepped past a twisted girder, a small laugh floated after him. Not a polite one, not timid. A real laugh, the kind a child makes when something for one brief second feels normal. It hit him harder than he expected. He didn't look back. He couldn't. But his chest ached the whole way home. And he knew he'd return the next day. Not just because it was right, because something in that moment had shifted. Because he couldn't bear the thought of that little girl laughing only once. And never again. The rain had started before sunrise. Cold, metallic droplets that tapped across the corrugated roof of Tyler's outpost like fingers drumming restlessly. The sky was a dull smear of gray, the horizon swallowed by haze and rusted silhouettes of broken towers. Tyler stood at the reinforced entryway, staring out past the cracked perimeter fence. His breath hung faint in the cold morning air as he scanned the ruins of Dockside Sector 9 again. He hadn't expected them to come, not really. Then he saw them. Two shadows, still as statues, huddled near the remains of an old cargo hauler, right where the salvage line ended and the dead zone began. The woman was half wrapped in what looked like a repurposed curtain, one arm locked around the child at her side. Her posture was rigid, protective, but this time she didn't hide. She was watching him. Taylor unlatched the gate slowly, deliberately, and stepped through without a word. The girl took a hesitant step forward before her mother pulled her gently back. Her instincts were sharp, and her eyes, pale and steady, searched for the trick. "Still no trap," Taylor said quietly. "Still just food. Still just me." He took a slow breath, lowered himself into a crouch, and offered his hand, not to shake, but to show it was empty, the same way he had with skittish dogs and frightened kids during the worst years. The little girl stepped forward again. This time, her mother didn't stop her. She moved carefully across the mud-caked concrete, her thin legs wobbling with cold, and came to a stop in front of him. She was still holding the thermal container from yesterday, clutching it like a precious relic. "We brought it back," she said proudly, holding it out with both hands. "Mommy said it's not right to steal." Taylor smiled and took the container. "Thank you. That's very kind." "What's it called again?" she asked, tilting her head. "The food?" "Stew," he said. "You liked it?" She nodded vigorously. "It was warm in my belly. Squishy rat soup doesn't do that." Behind her, the woman's expression remained unreadable, but there was a flicker of something new in her gaze. Not trust, not yet, but maybe hesitation. Taylor stood and stepped back, giving her room. "You don't have to stay," he said carefully, "but I have heat, clean water, dry clothes, if you want them." The woman's gaze swept over him, then past him toward the tower. Her jaw clenched, pride warring with need. She didn't speak, but she followed. Inside, the shelter was modest but secure. Tyler had salvaged enough from nearby wreckage to patch the walls and rebuild the filtration systems. It smelled faintly of cleaning solvent and dust, but not rot. A small heater hummed near the corner, its soft glow casting shadows across the metal floor. The little girl ran toward it immediately, holding her hands out to the warmth. "Your warm box is the best thing in the universe," she exclaimed. "Mommy, feel it, feel it." The woman hesitated at the threshold, her eyes scanning every corner, doors, vents, the ceiling. Her muscles were tight, her hand never far from the makeshift blade strapped to her thigh. Tyler didn't interrupt. He moved slowly to the storage wall and pulled out a folded bundle of clothes. A soft, oversized sweatshirt, a clean shirt, loose pants. Nothing fancy, just comfort. "I can show you where the washroom is," he said. "There's a shower. Private. Door locks from the inside." The woman's eyes flicked to him sharply. "You expect us to bathe?" "No," he said, "but it's there if you want it." She narrowed her eyes. "Water is sacred where we're from. We never waste it." "It's recycled," he explained. "Rain collectors on the roof, filters run through the purifier. You wouldn't be wasting anything." Still, she hesitated. Then the girl, still glowing from the warmth, looked up at her with pleading eyes. "Please, can I? I want to feel clean again." That cracked the shell. The woman stepped forward, just enough to accept the clothes from his hands. Their fingers brushed, and Tyler noticed the faint tremble in hers, whether from cold, exhaustion, or something deeper he couldn't say. "I'll wait out here," he said. She nodded once and led the girl down the hall. He listened to the sound of running water, soft splashes, and briefly, the girl's delighted laughter echoing through the narrow corridor. It was the first time this place had felt full. When they returned, the change was quiet but striking. The woman's long black hair was clean now, still damp and hanging loose. Her skin, once dulled by dirt, had a faint glow under the soft light. She wore the clothes like borrowed armor, stiff at first, unsure, but it was a start. She sat near the heater, back straight, gaze still sharp but less hostile. The little girl flopped onto a cushion and immediately began inspecting a stack of ration bars like she was choosing between fine desserts. "What do I call you?" the girl asked suddenly. "I can't call you food guy forever." Tyler chuckled. "Tyler, my name's Tyler." "I'm Saya," she said proudly, then pointed at her mother. "She's Kireya. She never tells people her name, but I can." Kireya shot her a look, but Saya just giggled and unwrapped a bar. Taylor looked at Kireya. "Thank you for trusting me, even a little." "I haven't decided yet," she replied, but her tone had softened. "But I'm not leaving tonight." He nodded. "That's enough." Saya took a bite of the ration bar, chewed, and wrinkled her nose. "Tastes like foot." Kireya let out a breath that might have been a laugh. Tyler smiled. The heater buzzed quietly, and for the first time in a long time, none of them felt entirely alone. There was still tension, like something hanging in the air waiting to fall, but for now it held. They didn't speak much more. They didn't need to. For people who had forgotten what comfort felt like, this was more than enough. It was the beginning, and Tyler knew, deep down, that this night would change everything. Not because of what he gave them, but because they had chosen, even if only for one night, to stay. Night in the wastelands didn't fall. It settled like ash, slow and suffocating. Inside the shelter, Tyler dimmed the overhead lamp until only the soft amber light of the heater remained. The warmth gave the metal walls a faint golden hue, making the space feel less like a repurposed bunker and more like something almost like home. Kireya sat on a padded bench near the heater, her back straight, her posture careful and composed, too composed. Her long, freshly washed black hair hung in loose strands around her face, still damp at the ends. She wore the oversized sweatshirt like armor, sleeves pulled halfway over her hands. Her gaze wasn't hostile anymore, but it wasn't relaxed either. She looked like someone still waiting for the trap to spring. Across the room, Tiller stirred a small pot of stew over the emergency cooker, the scent of warm spice and root vegetables softening the sterile air. Saya was curled up on a floor cushion, already half asleep, her green-skinned arms hugging a ration wrapper like it was a plush toy. "Want some more?" Tyler asked quietly, nodding toward the stew. Kireya shook her head. "I ate. You didn't have to feed us twice." "I didn't have to do any of it," he said, more gently than defensive, "but I wanted to." She said nothing to that, just watched the little girl on the floor as she shifted in her sleep and mumbled something about warm boxes and flying snacks. Taylor let the silence linger for a while. He didn't mind silence, not the comfortable kind. But this silence wasn't peace. It was heavy. Careful. "You want to know why I helped you?" he said finally, turning away from the cooker and leaning back against the counter. Kireya's eyes didn't move from Saya. "I already assumed it was guilt or loneliness." "Maybe both," he admitted, folding his arms, "but mostly because I saw the way you shielded her, the way you stood between her and everything, even when you could barely stay on your feet." "I'm her mother," she said simply, as if that explained everything. "It does," he said, "and it's why I knew you wouldn't hurt me. People who love like that, they don't go around breaking others." She didn't answer. Her fingers gripped the sleeves of her sweatshirt a little tighter. Tyler crossed the room slowly, pulling over a crate to sit across from her. He kept his distance, respectful, measured, but close enough that she could hear the truth in his voice. "You don't talk much," he said. "I talk when I have something worth saying." "Fair," he said, then added, "but sometimes silence leaves the worst things to grow." At that, she finally met his gaze. "You think I owe you my story?" she asked. "No, but maybe you owe it to yourself not to carry it alone." Something flickered in her expression. Resentment or pain, or maybe just exhaustion from carrying it too long. After a long pause, she said, "We had a world, my people, not perfect but proud. Then came the collapse, the wars, the hunger, the betrayal. We were scattered like ash in the wind, and those who survived stopped trusting anyone but themselves." Taylor didn't interrupt, he just listened. "I was a bonded wife, a warrior's wife. When the outposts fell, he stayed behind. He told me to run with our daughter, that he'd find us again." Her voice cracked slightly, but didn't break. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Hare didn't find us, and the others my own kind. They called me weak for fleeing, said I'd dishonored my name by choosing survival over battle." Tyler's jaw tensed. "They were wrong. I don't need your validation," she said, but her voice had lost its edge. "I know, but I'm giving it anyway." For the first time since she stepped into his shelter, Kireya looked uncertain, not angry, not guarded, just unsure of what to do with the weight of someone else's kindness. "You've lost someone too," she said. It wasn't a question. Taylor nodded. "A long time ago, she believed in fixing broken things, even people. I didn't think the world was worth that kind of hope. She did it anyway. And now? Now I try to do things she'd be proud of, not always sure if I get it right." Kireya was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Was she your bonded?" "No," he said, "but she could have been if time had been kinder." She looked down, her gaze catching on her daughter's sleeping form. The child's chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm, her small hands curled up near her face. Kireya's eyes softened. "She still asks if her father will come," she murmured. "I don't know how to tell her that hope is a cruel thing." "You don't have to," Tyler said. "You just give her something better to hope with." Kireya looked at him, and something in her face broke, just a little, not shattered, not crumbled, but cracked like the first line in a frozen lake where light begins to seep through. From across the room, Saya stirred and mumbled sleepily, "Mommy, are you gonna kiss him now?" Kireya's eyes widened. Tyler blinked. A flush of soft green pink bloomed on Kirea's cheeks, and she turned her face away, flustered, but not angry. Teller cleared his throat. She has quite the imagination. She gets it from her father, Kirea said, her voice low but not cold. Saya didn't stir again. Her breathing slowed. The silence settled once more. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was warm. The storm rolled in fast, sweeping across the ruins like a tide of static and broken light. Tyler stood at the narrow window, watching the sky churn with low thunder. Yellow lightning lit the edges of black clouds as the first drops of acid rain tapped against the metal walls like nails on a coffin lid. The tower groaned softly as the wind picked up. The generator, already running on patched cables and salvaged circuits, sputtered once before shutting down with a low click. Darkness fell. Inside the shelter, the air went still. Taylor swore under his breath and grabbed the emergency lantern from the supply shelf, flicking it on with practiced hands. A soft amber glow spilled out, casting long shadows against the bulkhead and illuminating the compact room in a warm, flickering haze. Saya's voice rang out from the other side of the room, half amused, half alarmed. "Your warm box died again. Is it coming back, or is this its funeral?" Tyler laughed, shaking his head. "It's not dead, just sleeping. Storms make it cranky." From the hallway, Kirea stepped into view. She had pulled her wet hair into a tight braid, and the sleeves of her borrowed sweatshirt were rolled up past her elbows. Even in dim light, she looked like someone prepared for battle. Shoulders squared, gaze sharp, every movement calculated. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, noting the lantern, the failed grid, the exposed wires at the corner of the ceiling. "We're compromised," she said. Taylor looked up at her. "No, the system's just down. The outer seals are still intact. You trusting rust and wishful thinking. I'm trusting the patch job I did with my own hands. These walls have held through worse." Kirea folded her arms, voice cool. "You act like this place is more than a pile of patched metal." He turned to face her. "Because it is. You just haven't stayed long enough to see it." A long silence stretched between them. The lantern flickered. Then she said, "Your optimism is exhausting. And your suspicion's a bit predictable," he snapped, sharper than he meant. Kirea narrowed her eyes. "You think I want to be like this?" Taylor stepped closer. "I think you've been out there too long. You've learned not to believe in anything unless it's about to break or betray you." "And you haven't?" He hesitated. The question landed harder than it should have. "I have," he said quietly. "But I don't want to stay there." They stood close now, the flickering light painting them in gold and shadow. Kirea's breathing had quickened, and her jaw was clenched like she was holding back 100 things she'd never let herself say. "I'm not your project," she said. "I never thought you were," Tyler replied, steady. "But I won't lie. Every day you're here, I start hoping you'll stop running. Hope is dangerous. So is silence." The words hung there, crackling between them. Then, from behind the heater, a small groan interrupted the moment. Saya sat up on her cot, her blanket wrapped around her like a cloak, blinking into the lantern's glow. "You two fight weird," she mumbled. "You sound like you want to kiss, but your voices are mad." Taylor took a breath, trying not to laugh. Kirea flushed a faint green at her cheeks and turned away quickly. "Go back to sleep, Saya." Saya smirked and flopped back down, her voice muffled through the blanket. "If you kiss him, don't do it while I'm watching. That's gross." Taylor cleared his throat, still facing Kirea. Her back was to him now, but he could see the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "You okay?" he asked gently. Kirea didn't answer right away. Then, without looking at him, she said, "You don't flinch when I raise my voice." "You don't scare me," he said softly. "Everyone else does." "I'm not everyone else." For the first time that night, Kirea turned back to him. Her eyes weren't angry now, just tired and honest. "I don't know what this is," she said. "Me either," Tyler admitted, "but I think it's real." He took a step forward, just enough to feel the heat of the space between them. She didn't step back. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the storm outside and Saya's steady breathing from across the room. Then Kireya said almost too quietly to hear, "I haven't been touched, really touched, by someone I didn't fear in years." Tyler didn't say anything. He simply reached out and gently brushed his fingers against hers. Barely a touch. A question, not a demand. She didn't pull away. The silence that followed the storm felt like the kind that came just before something cracked. For the past 2 days, the shelter had found a strange rhythm, one that felt almost too easy, too fragile. Kireya no longer flinched when Tyler moved too close. Saya laughed more than she spoke. Even the air inside the old tower felt lighter, as if all three of them were breathing a little easier for the first time in a long while. But peace in a place like this was never built to last. Tyler noticed it first. A ripple in the network, a flicker in the motion sensors along the western ridge. The data was clean, but something about it felt wrong, intentional. Too careful to be one of the wild scavenger packs, too smooth to be a malfunction. He didn't mention it to Kireya, not yet. No need to stir ghosts if it was just dust in the system. He was wrong. They arrived just after sunset, 4 figures at the edge of the perimeter. Their suits were sleek, dark, and quiet. Not human, not local, military, but not uniformed. Not anymore. They moved like men who had once been soldiers, now stripped of purpose and held together only by orders that no longer came from a central command. Tyler stepped onto the walkway, rifle slung low across his back. He didn't raise it. Not yet. One of the figures lowered their hood. The glow of the outer lights caught his face. Angular, weathered, eyes pale like frozen glass. "Kireu of the line Vareth," the man said without preamble. "We've come for you." Ha! Behind him, in the entryway, Kireya froze. Tyler turned just enough to see her in the doorway, her expression carved from stone. She didn't look surprised, only resigned. "You were supposed to be dead," the man continued. "Your record lists you among the fallen during the collapse of Bastar's Gate. A sealed record. Do you deny it?" "I don't deny surviving," Kireya replied, her voice steady, "but I deny belonging to whatever you've become." The man's gaze flicked past her toward Tyler. His lip curled. "You've taken shelter among them? Bred with them?" "She's not your concern," Tyler snapped, stepping forward. The soldier's attention returned to him, sharp and cold. "And you are?" "I'm the man keeping her alive." There was a moment of standoff silence, the kind that made the air vibrate with tension. Then the man said, "You will release her, or be marked as a collaborator. The punishment is exile at best, execution more likely." Kireya moved then, fast, fierce. She stepped in front of Tyler, one hand raised defensively. "Don't touch him." He looked at her, stunned. Not because of the words, but because of how she said them. Not as a refugee, not as a fighter, but as someone who had made a choice. The man didn't flinch. "You will come with us, by will or force." Behind them, inside the shelter, a small voice rang out. "Mommy?" Saya stood near the stairwell, her oversized shirt hanging past her knees, blinking against the floodlights from outside. "What's happening?" Kireya's entire body went still. Tyler took a breath, stepping slightly forward. "You don't want to fight here, let her talk." The soldier nodded once. "You have until sunrise." They turned and disappeared into the dark without a word, as quiet as they'd come. Inside, the tower felt hollow. Kireya sat at the edge of the cot, arms wrapped around herself, her expression distant. She hadn't spoken since they returned from the entry platform. Taylor stood a few feet away, unsure if he should speak or wait. Finally he asked, "What are they?" "Remnants," she said softly. Old guard, clinging to laws no one upholds anymore. And they want you because I survived, because I had a child, because I stopped serving their broken ideals. Tyler swallowed hard. Are you going with them? She looked up then, finally meeting his eyes. If I don't, they'll keep coming. They'll hurt you, maybe take Saya, maybe worse. Then we fight, he said immediately. Kyria gave a bitter smile. You're brave, but you don't understand how they think. Then explain it to me. You think this place is safe, but they won't break in through the front. They'll wait until we sleep. They'll take her first to make sure I follow. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then Saya walked in, no longer sleepy, no longer playful, just small, confused, and watching her mother like the world had shifted beneath her feet. Are we leaving? She asked, barely above a whisper. Correa didn't answer. Tyler stepped in. No one's going anywhere yet. Saya walked over to her mother, slipping her little hand into Correa's. I like my warm bed. I liked it here. Correa closed her eyes, her hand tightening around her daughter's. I know, little star, she whispered. I did too. Tyler's voice was low but clear. Then stay. Fight with me. We'll find a way. She looked at him again, truly looked. And for a moment Tyler thought she might say yes, that she might finally believe in something outside of running. But instead she stood. I have to think, she said. And just like that she walked into the back room, the door hissing softly closed behind her. Taylor remained still, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides. He wasn't sure what hurt more, watching her pull away, or knowing it wasn't out of doubt, but out of love. He looked down at Saya, who was now curled in the corner of the couch, hugging a small blanket to her chest. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. Will she come back? She asked. Taylor knelt beside her. I don't know, he said honestly, but I hope so. The wind howled low across the tower, dragging the scent of static and dust through the vents like a warning whispered by the world itself. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind felt unnatural, like something was holding its breath. Correa stood by the eastern window, arms folded, watching the horizon where the shadows moved just beyond the safety of the fence. 4 shapes, armored, organized, waiting. They weren't scouts anymore. They were here for her. Behind her, Saya sat silently, curled beneath a blanket that had grown too small for her growing frame, wide silver eyes fixed on the woman who had protected her through war, exile, and ruin. I don't want to leave again, Saya whispered. Correa turned, just slightly, enough to see her daughter but not enough to show her fear. I know. Tyler stood at the table, hands braced against the worn metal edge. He'd said nothing for a while, letting her think, letting her wrestle. The room was too still. She broke the silence. They won't stop. They'll try to take you back, Tyler said, or worse. They won't just take me, Correa's voice was low. If they believe Saya is a political tool, if they think she's a symbol, they'll use her, he finished grimly. She nodded. Tyler's hand moved to the old comm device embedded in the wall. He hesitated, then tapped the frequency he hadn't used in 5 years. The line buzzed once, twice, then clicked. You're alive, came a gravelly voice, half amused, half relieved. Taylor exhaled. You still running favors out of the dust line? For you? I'd run through hell. What do you need? Evac, backup, firepower if you have it. The man on the line gave a low whistle. Sounds like a party. Taylor's mouth twitched into something like a smile. They're coming for someone I care about, and I'm not letting them walk in here like they own it. Say no more. I'll bring shadows. The line cut out. Correa watched him from across the room. Friend? Old debt, Tyler replied. His name's Bryn, smuggler, freelance enforcer. He's been out of the official networks for years, but he knows how to make people disappear. And you trust him? I'd trust him with my life. She held his gaze a second longer, then looked down at Saya, small, silent, watching everything. This is our home now, Saya said, clutching the blanket to her chest. I don't want to run again. Something inside Kireya hardened, not with fear, but with resolve. She looked at Tyler and nodded. Then we fight. Preparations began immediately. Tyler powered down every non-essential system to funnel energy into the defense grid. His fingers flew across the cracked terminal, rerouting shield nodes, reinitializing turret protocols that hadn't fired in years. Above them, old drone ports blinked awake, lights flickering as dormant sentries prepared for engagement. Kireya moved with practiced grace, a soldier shedding exile like a second skin. She stripped to tighter layers, tied her hair back, and began assembling makeshift armor from scavenged plating, heat-resistant cloth, and repurposed kinetic mesh. Every piece she strapped down felt like reclaiming something she'd buried. Saya watched from the doorway, half fascinated, half afraid. "Will Mommy get hurt?" she whispered. Tyler knelt beside her. "Not if I have anything to say about it." He led her to a narrow panel beneath the stairwell, a sealed crawl space lined with shielding tiles and a battery-powered comm unit. "Stay in here. No matter what happens outside, this will hold." Saya looked up at him. "You'll come back?" He smiled. "You know I will." Dusk bled into night, and with it came fire. The first explosion hit the outer perimeter with a low, bone-deep hum, followed by a pulse of electromagnetic static that knocked out the east sensors. Taylor cursed and slammed his hand on the reactivation node. "They're cutting the grid. Deliberate strike pattern." "Calculated," Kireya muttered from her position on the west barricade. "They've studied us." "They underestimated us," he replied, opening a channel. "Bryn, status?" A rumble echoed in the distance, followed by Bryn's gravelly laugh through the comm. "Just kicked in their back door. Got 2 boys on your east flank, and Mira's taking the rooftops. Don't shoot her, she bites." Taylor grinned. "Copy that." Then the real assault began. 3 Laren soldiers breached the northern corridor, blades drawn, plasma pulses charged. Kireya met them head-on, moving like wind through steel. She ducked under a swing, flipped behind the lead attacker, and drove her blade into the weak point behind his armor's neck seam. One down. The others fell back, but not before one tossed a pulse grenade. Tyler grabbed the device mid-air and hurled it into the ventilation shaft, where it detonated harmlessly in a shower of blue sparks. Kireya raised an eyebrow as smoke drifted past them. "Nice throw." "I played 0 grav ball," he muttered, brushing dust from his sleeve. Outside, Bryn's team intercepted a second wave with synchronized precision. Mira, the sharp-eyed sniper, dropped 3 Lorens from the rooftop, each shot silent and perfect. The enemy regrouped, pushing hard toward the tower's southern wall, but found themselves caught in a crossfire between Tyler's automated turret and Bryn's ground assault. They never stood a chance. Still, they pressed forward, trained, relentless, obsessed. In the heart of the chaos, Kireya found herself face to face with one of the commanders. His voice was cold. "You were one of us?" "I still am," she replied. "But I chose. And this is what you chose. Dirt, humans. I chose freedom, and I chose them." With that, she disarmed him, kicked the weapon behind her, and left him lying in the mud. By dawn, the field was quiet. Smoke curled over the edges of the ridge. The scent of scorched metal and ion fire lingered in the air. The tower still stood, battered but intact. Taylor sat beside Kireya on the upper level, both of them streaked with ash and sweat. "We did it," he said. "For now," she replied. He nodded. "For now is enough." Below, Bryn whistled and approached, flipping a small chip between his fingers. "Transit credentials, custom profiles, new IDs. There's a window to slip out." 3 days. Quiet route to viral 3. Colony. Doesn't ask questions. Taylor took the chip. Kirea looked over at Saya, who had run out of hiding the moment it was safe and was now drawing strange symbols in the soot near the heater. Kirea met Tyler's gaze. "You still want this?" she asked. He didn't hesitate, more than anything. She looked back at her daughter, then down at her hands, stained with ash but steady. "Then we go." The shuttle ride was silent at first, too silent. They sat strapped in tight, backs pressed to cold seats, shoulders brushing through layers of tension that hadn't quite left their bodies. The hull groaned as it broke through low-atmosphere winds, then settled into the soft hum of stabilizers locking into orbit. Kirea stared out the small viewport, watching the dead world behind them shrink into a gray dot. That place, broken and brutal, had nearly taken everything, and yet it was where she had found the two people who now sat beside her. Saya leaned against her, small fingers wrapped around the worn fabric of her coat. Her green skin still held a faint smudge of dust, and her eyelids drooped with exhaustion, but there was peace in her expression, the kind Kirea hadn't seen in years. Taylor sat across from them, his coat thrown over one knee, eyes watching the scanner embedded in the wall like it might still call out an alert. He wasn't nervous, he was prepared. Always had been. He glanced over at her, gave a small smile. She nodded back. Nothing needed to be said yet. When the final docking clamp clicked into place and the pressure stabilized, the shuttle doors hissed open. They stepped out onto Virel 3. The colony was nothing like the places they'd known. There were no towers piercing polluted skies, no sirens screaming through cracked streets. The air smelled clean, like citrus and earth after rain, and the light was soft, golden, filtered through the protective dome overhead. It wasn't paradise, not exactly, but it was possible. A woman in a navy blue utility jacket approached them with a tablet and a welcoming smile that didn't feel forced. "Names?" she asked. Taylor stepped forward, producing the ident chip Bryn had burned for them. "Rion Callan," he said. "This is my daughter Sayla, my partner Mira." Kirea hesitated just for a second as the false name slipped from his lips. Mira. Not Kirea Vareth, not a fugitive, not a soldier, just Mira, a name without weight, a clean slate. She nodded once and repeated it. "Mira." The woman logged them in, scanned their prints, and handed over a packet. "You're in Quadrant C. Your quarters are modest but stable. Dome temperatures regulated, schools are optional, labor is volunteer-based, and no one asks where you came from." She looked up then and her smile softened. "Everyone here's running from something. You're not alone." Taylor thanked her and they moved into the colony slowly, shoulders brushing, feet crunching over gravel pathways edged by fresh-planted crops and solar arrays. Children ran between long curved housing units, chasing after drones that hummed like lazy birds. No guards, no sirens, no uniforms. They passed a small garden. Real dirt, not hydroponics. And Saya paused, dropping to her knees in the grass like it was treasure. "I forgot grass could feel this soft," she said. Voice hushed. Taylor knelt beside her. "That's because the last one you saw was full of broken glass." Saya touched a yellow flower blooming near the edge of the planter. "Can we stay here forever?" Kirea didn't answer right away. She looked around, taking in the way people smiled here, not the tight, guarded smiles of those still surviving, but something looser, lighter. Tentative hope. She nodded. "We'll stay as long as they'll have us." Their quarters were small, 2 rooms, a common area, a kitchenette with actual ceramic mugs instead of tin. There were sheets that smelled of clean linen and a window that looked out onto a man-made hill. That night, Saya fell asleep almost instantly, curled into a real mattress, arms tucked under her cheek. Taylor and Kirea sat on the small couch in the main room. He handed her a cup of steeped root tea, something native to the colony. She took it in both hands and breathed in the warmth. "It's strange," she said quietly, not listening for footsteps outside the door. "I keep waiting for the alert tone in my ear," Tyler admitted. "It's too quiet." She smiled faintly. "We'll learn how to live with peace." He looked at her, really looked, at the lines in her face, the shadows that had faded just slightly in the past 2 days. "Do you think we're allowed to?" Kureya tilted her head. "Allowed by who?" "I don't know," he said. "Fate, the universe, ourselves." There was a long pause. Then she reached out and laced her fingers with his. "I don't think we have to ask any more." He squeezed her hand gently, and they sat like that. No guards, no armor, no threats. Just two people at the edge of something new, with a child asleep in the next room, and a world outside the window that didn't want to take anything from them. When Saya stirred later that night and padded sleepily into the room, she climbed onto the couch without a word and curled into Tyler's side. "You better not make her cry," she mumbled into his chest, "or I'll make you sleep in the dirt." Kureya laughed softly, wrapping her arm around them both. "No dirt here," she said. "Good," Saya murmured. "This couch is yours now. It's the rule." And in the quiet after that, surrounded by new names, under a new sky, a broken family became something whole. Not by blood, not by law, but by choice. And that made all the difference. The sun filtered gently through the synthetic sky dome, casting warm, dappled light across the open square in the center of Quadrant C. The air smelled faintly of sweetgrass and warming soil. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime made from salvaged metal tinkled in the breeze. It was the kind of day you didn't notice in the chaos of survival. Quiet, safe. The kind of day you only realized you had once the danger was long gone. Saya was running. Her bare feet padded against the soft, packed grass as she dashed through the small playground, chasing a drone shaped like a cartoon bird. Her laughter echoed across the courtyard like music, bright, unguarded, endless. Tyler watched her from a nearby bench, leaning back with one arm draped along the top rail, his other hand nursing a warm mug. His eyes followed her movements, not out of fear, but with that calm, weightless feeling that came when you realized you didn't have to look over your shoulder anymore. Kureya sat beside him, cross-legged, quietly repairing one of Saya's old shoes with a small toolkit balanced in her lap. Her hair was down today, loose and swaying with the breeze, catching the sun in dark, silky strands. The tension in her face had faded over the weeks, replaced by a softness that still surprised him every time she smiled. And she smiled often now. Saya suddenly halted mid-spin and turned, breathless, toward them. Her cheeks were flushed, eyes wide with joy. "Abba," she called out. Tyler froze. It wasn't the first time she'd said it, not exactly. She'd danced around the word for days, said him or Tyler or not my real dad but kinda is. But this time, she said it like it was truth, like it had always been. "Abba, can I have one of those big soft bears from the market? The squishy kind with the floppy ears and the weird face? Please? Please?" Tyler blinked, then chuckled. "You want me to trade half a week's rations for a weird-faced bear?" Saya nodded with total seriousness. "Yes, 'cause I will hug it forever and name it something super dumb, like Wobbles." Kureya let out a sharp laugh, nearly dropping the shoe. "Wobbles?" Tyler repeated. "That's the best you've got?" Saya grinned. "Don't judge the bear before you meet him." He stood up, brushing off his pants. "All right, let's go find Wobbles." Saya cheered, sprinting toward the market path before spinning back to grab Kureya's hand. "You too, he needs a mommy approval." Kureya rose, took her daughter's hand, and then turned toward Tyler. "You spoil her." "Gladly," he said. Later that evening, after dinner and laughter and a now-named Wobbles tucked safely in Saya's arms, Tyler and Kureya stood outside their small home. The night was quiet. Stars flickered beyond the dome. The kind of quiet that once felt suspicious, but now felt like peace. She reached for his hand and stepped in close. "I saw you today," she whispered. "When she called you Baba, you looked like someone who wasn't sure he deserved it." He nodded slowly. "I wasn't sure." She was. Kirea leaned in, pressing her forehead gently to his. "You're hers now," she said, "and mine." Then, softly, without hesitation, she kissed him. Not because the world was ending, not because they were afraid, but because it was finally truly safe to feel that much. When they pulled apart, he looked into her eyes, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I love you," he said. She smiled, quiet and sure. "I love you too." And this time there was no weight, no fear. Just truth, spoken in a new world with stars above and laughter inside. A family made not by blood or law, but by choice. And love. Always love,